What's up YouTube, I'm Guy, and today on the channel we are checking out a Seiko 5. It is a style of watch that is basically my favorite genre in the watch hobby. If you've been following my channel for the last year and a half or so, you're probably already aware that I love field watches. Some of my most earliest reviews were on field watches. The Hamilton Khaki Field Automatic was one of my first reviewed watches. Also the Seiko SNK809, another one of my very first watches. Now that watch isn't truly a field watch. In size and proportion I would say yes, that it's more of a field watch than the way the dial and handset present, and that's like a Flieger or pilot watch. Well, this watch is another Seiko 5. It's the SNX809, and it is through and through a field watch. If I knew that this watch existed back then when I bought that watch, I would have gotten this one, without a doubt. I love the way that it presents, and hopefully I can share it with you guys and maybe open your eyes to some other options. That SNK809, wildly popular, probably the most popular first watch for people that are jumping into the watch collecting hobby, if I had to guess. If I was able to go to Las Vegas and throw down some money on what is the most common watch people buy when they're getting into this hobby, I would bet that it's the SNK809. I'm a little surprised that this SNX809 hasn't been talked about more, because I think it's better. In terms of quality and fit and finish, all of that stuff, it's basically the same. It's a Seiko 5. You get what you would expect to get. But in terms of style and presentation, I like it better personally. I'm going to guess that a lot of you guys are going to like it better too. So when we jump over to the tabletop, soak it in and then tell me what you think down in the comments below. Seiko 5 SNX809. This is it, guys. This is the Seiko 5 field watch that we are going to be talking about today. One of my favorite genres, styles, or designs of watches, as I have expressed already. I really do love field watches, and this one is no exception. First things first, I'll give you a quick look at the hang tag that came with this watch. A basic, simple, silver Seiko hang tag on the other side. Reference SNX809K, caliber 7S26. If you want to pick one of these up, there's your reference number. I have noticed the prices on these fluctuate since I've gotten this one. I paid around $85 for this watch 6 or so months ago, if memory serves. I had to get it from, I think, Japan. I don't know, maybe it was Singapore, somewhere overseas off of eBay. And yeah, the prices do fluctuate. $85 6 months ago, I see them selling for as high as $150 now. Would I pay $150 for this watch? Well, being as how I got it for so cheap originally, and cheap isn't the right word, but you know what I mean, saved that much money, I would probably have a hard time going an extra $65 on this watch. So keep your eyes peeled. You can probably find it for under $100 if you're patient and want to look. That's sort of, what happened to me. Now, this is, again, the SNX809, not to be confused with the SNK809. I'm going to bring up a picture that shows these two watches side by side because I unfortunately don't have my SNK809. I let that watch go a while back. A good watch, don't get me wrong, but I decided to sell it. The SNK809 is kind of a watch that's confused with its identity. You can see in this picture that the SNK809 is a watch with the proportions, the size, the stature, if you will, of a military-style field watch at 37 millimeters, just like this watch that we have here today. However, the dial and handset design is most certainly influenced by the pilots or Flieger style watches. Those watches, however, that it is based on or draws design influences from are typically very large watches. So I find that SNK809 a little awkward. Now, if you look at the cases of these two watches, also bear in mind that the SNK809 presents even smaller than its 37 millimeter proportions might suggest, because the lugs taper down somewhat thin. On this SNX809, on the field watch that we're reviewing here today, I just think that the overall proportions and styling of the case work better to give a slightly more robust feeling watch on the wrist. It just stands off the wrist a little more. It has a little bit more presence. It just feels a little bit larger, I guess. And while 37 millimeters isn't a tiny watch, and both of these watches do have a case diameter of 37 millimeters, I just found that SNK809 that I used to own, the one with the Flieger style or pilot style dial, really presented small to me. And this field watch that I have here today, it wears better. That's just the bottom line for me. For you guys, your mileage may vary. I don't know what to say. All I can do is give you my opinions. Now, we will cover the dimensions of this watch. They're a little bit small, honestly, a little bit petite, just like that other watch. But I'm going to point out some reasons on why it presents a little bit bigger than these dimensions might suggest. First things first, the case diameter from edge to edge here, 37 millimeters. We have a lug width of 18 millimeters. We have a thickness of roughly 11.5 millimeters. And from lug to lug, from one extremity of the case to the other, from side to side, if you will, we have 42 millimeters. 42 millimeter lug to lug is small. A 18-inch lug width where the bracelet attaches is also a little bit small. Those are two key components to the size of a watch that make it feel small. The overall diameter at 37 millimeters, that's not really the thing that you need to pay attention to. However, this watch doesn't wear small, and here's why. First things first, the lug to lug. It is 18 millimeters, but since this comes on a metal bracelet and that first link in the metal bracelet flares out beyond the width of the lugs, this feels more like a 20 millimeter bracelet on my wrist. The 42 millimeter lug to lug, you can't really do a lot about that, but because of the way this case is shaped, because of the way these lugs kind of have a more rounded overall case and not thin tapering lugs like we saw in that picture of the SNK809, it just presents a little bit larger on the wrist. So those are the two things, the two factors that I find that make this watch wear a little bit bigger than that SNK809. And again, that was a problem for me with that watch. Now, yeah, there you go. There you have it. It's my thoughts on the overall sizing and why I like the presentation or the proportions of this watch better. I think it's a better choice than the SNK809 for me. It might be for you as well. What else can we talk about here? Well, let's talk about this case. The case and the bezel, it's all a very high polished presentation. The thing that's a little strange about it is, while certainly this is, well, maybe not certainly, but I would think that this is a stainless steel construction. I'm not entirely sure. Let me zoom in here a little bit closer and tell you what I think. So the polishing on this watch, it is very, very highly polished. Like a mirror. You can see me kind of peeking over my camera there in the reflection on the flanks of this case. Now the presentation looks nice, don't get me wrong, I don't like it. I prefer to have a brushed top on my case lugs. This one is of course polished as well. But the thing is it just polished stainless steel? It's like way too mirrored for me to believe that a watch at this price point is in fact just a high polished stainless steel. I think that this is chromed. It reminds me of when I used to have a Harley-Davidson motorcycle, which, long story, I had to sell, but nevertheless, I had a Harley-Davidson motorcycle in my exhaust pipes. Like, this is the level of, like, mirrored finish you would get on that chrome-plated metal. I feel like this is probably chrome-plated, or potentially it could be. I mean, I don't really know. It's very difficult to find true specifications online on these entry-level affordable Seiko 5s. I couldn't find out for sure. I just don't believe that this is simply high-polished 316L stainless steel. Another reason that leads me to believe that. Now, I cracked the case back on this watch in order to regulate the movement, because I like my watches to be as accurate as possible. In the process of doing that, let's see if I can get the camera to focus in here and show you, you see, if we can get a good focus here. I scratched up the case back in several spots like this. I don't think it's going to come in too well, But I even deformed where I put the notch of my tool into the case back a little bit. It's very soft is the point that I'm trying to get to. Not like I would expect a very hard 316L piece of steel. Maybe it's 316L underneath there, but again, I believe that this is a chrome finished case, or plated in some way. Maybe it's not chrome, I don't know what the plating is, but that's my suspicion. That all said, I still like the look of it. I think that at this price point, it really doesn't matter if it's some sort of plated material and not a true hand-polished or machine-polished, high-polished 316L stainless steel. It doesn't really matter to me. I think that the presentation looks good. I don't have any problems with it, other than the fact that I would prefer that the tops of the lugs not be polished along with the sides of the cases. But that's just me, and it's not a big deal. So, again, we have this case, we have the bezel. Over at the 4 o'clock position, we have a very nice, typical Seiko 5 presentation of a crown, which is recessed into the case down at just about the 4 o'clock position. This crown is absolutely tiny. Manipulating it is a little bit difficult. Pulling it out, not a big deal. First position, second position. But you can see how low profile it is. I mean, you basically have to use your fingernails just to get a grip on it and adjust the time. This is, of course, not a hacking movement, so that you can see the seconds hand is running. We'll talk more about this 7S26 movement in a minute, but for right now, we're talking about the case and the crown. Reseating the crown down gives us, I believe this watch has 50 meter water resist. It might say on the case back, I don't remember, I didn't write it down. It does say water resistant, but it doesn't tell us how resistant it is, does it? A little bit peculiar. I think it's 50 meter water resist, and if it's not 50, it's probably 30. It's certainly not 100, but nevertheless, it's not a dive watch. It's not meant to fill that role, so keep that in mind. This is not a screw-down crown, it's just a push-in crown. Make sure that it's pushed in if you're going to get it wet. Next thing to talk about is the crystal. Just a typical Seiko Hardlex crystal, but I have no problem with Hardlex crystal. It's been, perfectly reliable or robust, if you will. I've never scratched a Hardlex crystal. I've never cracked a Hardlex crystal. No problems with that whatsoever. Now, the main event of any field watch for me is going to be the dial and the handset, and I absolutely love field watch dials. We have an outer seconds track with larger graduations at each 5-minute mark, as you can see on a relatively flat matte black dial. We have large oversized Arabic 1 through 12 numerals, which are loomed with Seiko's Lumibright Loom, and an inner 24-hour scale from 13 to 24 in smaller Arabic numerals. We do actually have a Seiko 5 applied logo there just below the 12 and 24 hour indices or markers. It looks pretty nice. Down at the very bottom at the 6 o'clock position, we have the phrase or word automatic. I guess, whatever. We all know it's automatic. We don't really need text on there to tell us, but there it is. It does add a little bit of symmetry, balancing out the top and the bottom of the dial, I suppose. The handset is a syringe-style handset. And let me zoom the camera in slightly closer here so we can get a better look at that. So let's check out this handset. I'm a big fan of syringe-style hands. I have this basic style of hands on my Hamilton Khaki Field Automatic, and I love them. However, on the Hamilton, they are a high-polished stainless steel handset, and you can see that this is coated or painted solid white with the Seiko Lumibright Loom filling the hour and the minute hands, and then of course a little pip on the counterbalance side of the seconds hand that is also loomed. This handset is very similar to the Hamilton Khaki Field Mechanical that I recently reviewed, in that they are solid white and not quite as long of a point on the syringe end tips of the hands. I again prefer the handset on my Hamilton Khaki Field Automatic. I think it looks a little bit nicer, a little bit more high-end, but these are nice too, and I do again love this style of handset. The loom on this dial is quite good, as you would come to expect with Seiko's Lumibright, and I'll bring in some video of it so that you can see it in action. It is, of course, bright and long-lasting, although not as generously applied as we might come to expect on dive watches like the SKX and, of course, the Seiko Monster. Nevertheless, it is good Loom. I do wish that they would have put Loom on each of the embellished graduations on the second or minute track at each 5-minute mark. So up at the 12, over at the 1, over at the 2, you can see we have those somewhat triangular, oversized graduations. I wish those were loomed as well, but they chose to only do the main 12-hour Arabic numerals and the handset. Not a big deal, I guess, but that's one thing that I would have liked to have seen different. This watch does, of course, run the Seiko 7S26 movement, which is, as people like to describe it, a workhorse movement, a reliable and robust movement. Here's my take on that. Yes, it does work. Yes, it will probably work for many years without a service, but will it be accurate over that period of time? In my experience of having reviewed a lot of Seiko watches that have both the 7S26 and the 4R35 or 36, they're wildly hit or miss when it comes to accuracy. Now, if you don't care about accuracy, if your watch is running 40, 50, 60 seconds fast or slow per day, if that doesn't bother you, then there's no reason why you shouldn't consider a watch with the 7S26. But you are as likely to get a watch that runs 6 or 7 seconds fast as you are to get a watch that runs 25, 35, 45 seconds per day fast. And the real problem that I see is over time, they tend to wildly change their timekeeping characteristics. Let me bring in a Seiko SKX009 here for a point of reference. This also uses the 7S26 movement. I regulated this watch some time ago to be about accurate within 5 or 6 seconds per day fast. Then I gave this watch to a buddy of mine, and he wore it casually for about 6 months. I needed to borrow this watch from him, so he lent it back to me, and over the time that I had it here, I noticed that it was not keeping good time whatsoever. In the course of 6 months, without taking any significant amount of, abuse or hard use, this watch went from being +5 or +6 seconds per day fast to being somewhere in the ballpark of 1.5 minutes fast. And this watch is only about a year old. Again, it was not abused in any way, shape, or form. As you can see, it looks very good still. It's not been dropped. It's not been, what can I say? He didn't murder this watch. And in that time frame, it went from being a very accurate watch to being wildly inaccurate. If I put it on my time grapher, and I'm not going to demonstrate that, but take my word for it, the fluctuations are also crazy. It's like this, almost like a wave sign of up and down. It'll be running +20 for 10 seconds, then +50 for 10 seconds, then +30 for 10 seconds. It's just all over the place. So, what I am trying to say is that, again, if a watch just running is all you care about and keeping reasonable time, then sure, the 7S26 is just fine. But in my experience, I have grown to come somewhat disappointed with the performance characteristics of this movement. The last thing to cover on this watch is going to be the bracelet. As you can see, it does come on a metal bracelet. I took a couple of links out, and I will show you these links because they are those cheap folded metal links. Not great, as you can see. Not the style of links that we would all like. It's got hollow center links, as you can see there. A relatively low quality product that most companies really aren't using anymore. But it is still found pretty commonly in the Seiko 5 line of watches. I don't hate this bracelet. It's a pain to resize, but once you've got it sized up, it is comfortable enough. I don't really have any complaints about it. It looks very nice, and if we look at the finishing, the brushing on the bracelet is actually done really well. I'm sure it's, of course, a machine brushed finish, but nevertheless, it looks great. The clasp is a very, very honestly low quality stamped metal signed Seiko clasp. It does have plenty of micro adjustment holes on the side, which is a plus, but there's no push buttons or anything. It's just a friction lock clasp that opens up to a lightweight, low quality stamped metal swing arm. And then, of course, the same low quality clasp. Yeah, this bracelet is nothing to write home about, but if you can find this watch at a price point of below $100 like I did, I don't think that that's a problem. That is about what you should probably expect on a $100 watch. Otherwise, yeah, I do like it. It is, again, comfortable once you get it all sized up for your wrist. So, yeah, there it is. If I didn't mention it, of course, hollow end links. You would expect that as well. Well, guys, that is my presentation, my review of the SNX809. Stylistically, I do love this watch. Affordability, top notch. I mean, it comes in at a great price point if you can find it under $100 like I did. And for that money, you're getting a pretty quality product. I'll jump back over to the studio view with my final thoughts and wrap up this review. So what are my final thoughts, or closing thoughts, if you will? Again, if I had to pick between this and the SNK809, I'm going with this one every time. I like the style better. In terms of quality, it's a Seiko 5. You're getting what you're getting. But I think it's a better executed design. I think that the SNK809 is a little confused on its identity. It doesn't know what it wants to be. It is sized and scaled to the proportions of a military field watch, but it has the dial and the handsets of a Flieger or pilot watch. Pilot watches tend to be much larger than the 37 millimeters that SNK809 comes in at, and again, I feel like it has a little bit of an identity crisis. This watch that we reviewed today, the SNX809, is basically perfect for an entry-level field watch in the Seiko 5 line. I think it's probably going to be your best bet for your first field watch, if maybe not your only field watch. What about the Timex Expedition? I'm sure people are going to ask me about that. That's another field watch, and it's one that I've also reviewed. It's a cool watch, don't get me wrong, but it is quartz, and a lot of people want an automatic watch. I don't dislike quartz watches. I think they're great. I understand the role that they fill in our collections, and I would never say don't get a quartz watch. But if you're looking for an automatic watch, something a little bit different, maybe something a little bit more quote-unquote special, then this would be a better choice. It's just a little bit cooler, I think, because it's an automatic. And I think a lot of people feel that way. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this review. As always, I want to say I appreciate it, that everyone here tunes in once, sometimes twice a week to check out my videos. It means the world to me. Thank you very much. If you'd like to help the channel in other ways, of course, obviously just watching my videos is a great help, but there's some other things you can do. Down in the description of this video, and in every video that I do, there are some links to my social media accounts, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm not super active, so you're not going to get inundated with all kinds of posts and updates and messages, but if you want to follow me on there, you can stay up to date on my new releases, and that would help me out. If you want to support me financially, I could always use more help over at Patreon. I appreciate the guys that are over there supporting me right now, and I would appreciate it if you wanted to go over there and make a small contribution on a monthly basis. That would be outstanding. Another way that you can help me financially without it actually costing you any money, I always put links to the products that I review down in the description of my videos through my Amazon Associates or Affiliates account. If you click on those links and buy something, whether I've reviewed it or not, it doesn't really matter. I get a small commission. That does add up. That helps afford me funds to run the channel, to buy new products to review, to do giveaways, and everything else that I like to do here. So if you're going to do some shopping on Amazon, please consider clicking on my affiliate link found down below in the descriptions. Alright guys, I appreciate it, and I will be back, what is today, Sunday? I'll be back early next week with another watch video. Take care now. Bye.